You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I oppose this amendment, and I just wanted to add to some of the comments of my colleagues. I was just going through and re-looking at the resolution and seeing the many places where the language is dehumanizing, and I say this as an immigrant myself, somebody who spent 17 years in this country before I had the great privilege and honor of becoming a U.S. citizen, came here at 16 by myself. And I look at some of the language of this resolution, and I do think it bears pointing out that the word alien is used consistently. I had many years where I was referred to as an alien, and I have to tell you, it was a terrible experience. I understand that it's in the law, but this administration has made efforts to change the way we talk about people, not talk about them as aliens. But in addition, the implications in these whereas clauses that somehow, and it says here, whereas hosting such aliens on school campuses poses a significant safety risk to school children, the idea somehow that these immigrant kids who are seeking asylum, whose parents are seeking asylum, are going to pose a safety threat to kids in schools, and the continued efforts to lift up this so-called illegal aliens that are coming into this country is very, very insulting. And I wanted to just give a little history lesson of the word invasion to my friend across the aisle, in case perhaps you don't know where and how that word has been used in the history and the context of our country. It goes all the way back to the Chinese immigrants. Actually, in 1873, there were ads taken out in newspapers that said Chinese invasion in capital letters, and really put the fear of God into people, that somehow we were being invaded by this force that was going to do harm to the country. But that has continued. That was not just from 1873. In fact, in 1973, there was a book called The Camp of Saints by a Frenchman named Jean Raspail, and it was about the, quote, invasion of Indian refugees into France, onto the French coast. And the gist of the book is that the French military lost their resolve to fight back against that group of Indian immigrants who were coming to France, and allowed them to enter, and it led to, instead of massacring them, by the way, and it led to the complete fall of Western civilization. And the gist of it is really that the French military lost their nerve. They didn't massacre these migrants as they landed, and that led to a collapse, not just of French civilization, but also of Western civilization. That is the book that Steve Bannon uses all the time as one of his favorite books, and quotes from that book. And I think it's important to understand that the tactics here are the same going back to the 1800s as today, of creating such an existential threat that any violence is also acceptable to counter that existential threat, right? And also to dehumanize to such an extent that the violence is then seen as merited to these people who have been dehumanized. And I say this because I think that it's fine for us to debate policy on immigration. It's fine for us to have disagreements. It is not fine for us to in any way encourage violent rhetoric, and rhetoric that leads to violence. And this kind of rhetoric about invasion absolutely does lead to violence.
Madam Chairman.
I'm sorry, this is my time, and I don't think I've said anything.
I request the words be taken down. She's suggesting that the amendment is encouraging violence, that the amendment is supporting violence.
Madam Chair, this is my time, and I have said nothing impugning.
The gentlewoman will suspend. The gentleman is raising a point of order.
I object to the point of order.
The gentlelady has suggested that the amendment is approving or condoning violence against individuals because of using the term alien. And that is certainly not true and should not be permitted, and her words should be taken down.
I object to the point of order.
Madam Chair, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Just a moment, Mr. Takano. I'm going to ask the clerk to please read the words that Ms. Jayapal spoke.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to rephrase if that is easier.
The gentlelady will suspend.
Sure.
I appreciate the gentlelady's offer to rephrase, and I have no further objection.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman, and can I resume my?
You have 40 seconds remaining. You're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's very important to understand that words have meaning. Words have meaning when we use them here. They have meaning when we use them in society. And we should understand that, just as an example, the person who issued a racist manifesto right before he went on a deadly mass shooting spree in El Paso specifically used the words immigrant invasion. So I would respectfully urge my colleagues on the other side to not use words like that, because whether they intend them or not to be utilized in violent ways, they are utilized in that way. And I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to urge every member on this committee to be mindful of your words. I have talked about the importance of language my entire time in Congress. We all need to be sensitive to it, and so I ask you to do that. I will also point out that we have stayed fairly close to existing legislation, has been pointed out before. The words illegal alien are in the statutes, and that is what we have used in many cases. There is no attempt on our part to encourage any violence of any sort. That shouldn't have to be said, but I'm going to say it. Is there any member who wishes to be recognized